morning, everybody. So this is actually a part one of a two-part webinar, and we titled this our Fostering Independence and Building Community in Students with Disabilities. And today we are going to be focusing on part one, which is our pathways towards independence and employment. So we're really wanting to talk about how do you help students become contributing members of their community.
And so what we're going to cover this day are these four main topics. We're going to look at how you assess the environment that your students are going to be in, how you assess the student themselves, how to identify and develop pathways towards independence, and then the best practices for when you're doing this. And Julia and I are going to bounce back and forth in the presentation between topics.
So as Jenna said, we are going to be starting with the assessment of the environment. So really what this means is, what does the family and community need that the student can contribute to? This is going to be how we learn about what goal is most appropriate to work towards. And we will be talking about how you're going to really be doing that. So we'd like to start with identifying the needs in the family. For a lot of times, what's most important for a lot of people, for students, their family community, is what do you need in that family, in the household? What needs to be done? As students become adults, it's really important to identify their new roles in their families. You know, moving from a child, not just needing to be cared for, but how do they contribute? So starting with, what does the family need help with? Is it chores? Is it cleaning, cooking? Maybe it's more responsibilities, childcare within the household. Maybe the family has a family business that they need their child with a disability to contribute to. It could be something outside of the household as well, which we have kind of touched base more on in a little bit. But we're really looking at this paradigm shift of moving towards adulthood. As I said before, our students with disabilities, as they turn 18, they become adults. They are no longer children. And that's something that sometimes it's hard to really reframe and start to think about, because they might not necessarily move towards adulthood in the same way that somebody without a disability might. And it's great to really look at, what does that look like in their community, in their family? What do other adult children do in their household, in their community? Because just because you turn 18 doesn't mean you're suddenly an independent adult for anybody. You know, children, maybe unmarried children, are still living in the household and helping with other members of the family. And so that could still be in a very appropriate place for a student with disability as they become an adult. I just want to give you a couple examples so that this can really make some more sense, give some concrete examples of some students that we've had that we have kind of helped in some of these different situations. So one of my students, Sophia, she's a student that at first she really didn't do much in the household. Her parents took care of her. She did not have chores or responsibilities. And as she got older, you know, she really started to like doing dishes. It was something we practiced at school. And this was a great thing for her family, because she started taking on that responsibility of doing dishes at home after every meal. And it's something that's kind of small, but it really did help out with timing for her mom. Her mom had other children to take care of. And this was a great way for her to contribute and feel proud of herself and really be part of her family. Another example, a little bit different, a student of ours, Diego, he already had responsibilities in the household. He did laundry, he did dishes, but his mom had another child. He had a new baby sister, and his mom needed to go back to work. because her income was really important for the family. And so his responsibilities started to change at that point. Instead of doing laundry and dishes, he started to learn some basic childcare, taking care of his sister, making a bottle, changing diapers, those kind of things. So it really can look like anything. But what we are trying to help you guys as educators or maybe family members do is identify what are those needs, what is going to be the thing that's really going to help out the student and their family. So just some notes on this is just remember all families are different, and what your family needs is what your family needs. So it might look very different for every student. For some students, this is going to be the end goal, contributing to their household, and that is going to be the thing that is going to help them most in life, help their families most, and maybe with their skills and their abilities, that's really what they're going to be doing to be productive adults and members of their household. We really want to focus on that student starting from being dependent to becoming independent. So for some students, though, we're going to go beyond contributing to their household. And if this seems right for your student, based on some questions which we will help you ask and answer, then identifying the needs in the community is also very important. What can the student contribute to their community? And skills that are learned at home and at school can be utilized later in a community setting or to meet a different need in the family. So with that example of Diego, our student, you know, he was in the role of a childcare provider for his sister for 6 years until she went to school all day. And now he has this new set of skills that he's practiced for 6 years, but he no longer needs it at home. So how can we take those skills that he learned for those 6 years at home, contributing to his own family, and how can we build on those skills and make it something that he can use maybe for other family members, for aunts, for uncles, taking care of cousins, or maybe he's able to take those skills and actually get a job in the community, babysit, have some income coming in for his family, work at a daycare. He has these skills, and we want to take them and translate them into something maybe different. And as we said before, you know, it's really important to think about the student you're working with, what their family situation is, how comfortable people feel. But we want to give you all different ideas for different pathways based on those student situations. So some examples of after you identify the needs of the community, what are some things that your students could be doing? If one of the needs is income, and for some students and families, that's what it is going to be, bringing in some outside income. These students are adults. It would be really helpful to their family for them to help support themselves, but also maybe their families. A student-run business is a great place to start. This is where a student is using some of the skills that maybe they've already built at home or at school and using it to create some income. So starting with things that they might be able to do already at home, like maybe a laundry service or selling produce from their garden, eggs from any chickens that they own, babysitting services, cleaning, cooking, selling food that they've made. So things, goods or services that those students are able to do and provide, and then turning it into something that can generate income. And as I said, we are going to be touching on these topics a little bit more in depth later, but I just wanted to mention them as a possible pathway. If a student, maybe they would like to gain some job experience, they want to contribute to their community, but income is not necessary right away. You know, volunteering is a really great way to build some skills, to contribute to your community, to maybe build some relationships so that maybe somebody in your community might give you a job, volunteering is a great place to start. And I think this is actually a picture of some of our students doing a beach cleanup. So giving back to our community, but also building some skills while they're doing it. And then, of course, looking for paid employment in the community is what we hope for a lot of our students, but that can be a really tricky thing based on the availability of jobs in your community, based on the families or the students, how comfortable they feel with leaving their immediate community, looking for outside work. And that can also be hard if the student maybe hasn't built up those skills yet. So they might need to build the skills at home or volunteering or in their own business before they're ready to seek employment in an established business. Okay.
So this idea of preparing people for independence, as you've heard Julia talk about, we're looking at pathways towards independence, and so that requires looking at a lot of different aspects of a student's life, and this combination of what does the family need, what does the community need, and now we're looking at specifically what does the student bring with them. And so assessing the student for their skills is sort of the next step in this process. And skills assessment, Jules, if you want to move on to the next one there. Skills assessment is really looking at what are the strengths and ability that your student already possesses. Again, we're trying to go from dependent to independent. And so you want to begin to refocus and reframe what your students are doing under the lens of capability. And so skills assessment is for us to begin to look at what can they do? What are their attributes that they bring towards with them into the work environment and into the volunteer environment? And so you want to look at what they possess, and then you want to look at what are the emerging skills they have that you can build on, things that they're almost there in terms of being independent, but need just that little extra help. And then finally, what are some tasks that your student might have long-term difficulty with? And that doesn't mean they can't still perform tasks or be productive members of their society. It just means we may have to accommodate or modify something in order to get them there. So this young woman here, Jade, is doing some laundry. And for her, there were a number of steps in doing laundry that she was very independent in. And then there were a couple steps that were pretty hard for her. And it was through assessment that we were able to really zero in on which parts of that process were hard for her, so that we as educators could begin to focus our attentions on helping to build those minute skills, which would bring her to full independence in that task. So if we go on to the next slide here, this is an example of one of the things we did. So Jade was fine with putting the laundry in, measuring, and putting in the detergent, but the washing machines can be tricky. And so we sort of modified this washing machine because it was very confusing. It was like a computer. and so what we did is we put in some visuals, like the red and blue over cold and the white over hot, to remind her that if you're loading colored clothes, that's the button you push. If you're loading white clothes, that's the button you push. And by numbering, which is the first button you push, which is the second. So this was an accommodation to help her manage a machine that was a little too complex for her, but with some slight adjustments, we were able to make it so she could become independent in doing laundry the whole process. And this is an important thing as educators, because our students all have different households. They all have access to different kinds of technology or different environments. And it's important to remember that you can still help them and kind of modify what their specific situation is to help them move towards independence. So skills assessment, the purpose of the assessment, again, is to identify the strengths and potential areas for growth, and then determine the best ways to support your students. What can they learn? And what can we accommodate and modify to be independent? So this is Brian, and Brian's a young man in our class who, in his household, one household need the family identified was that, despite being in his 20s, he still could not shower independently. And his parents were kind of concerned about that because it was taking them a half hour out of their morning every morning to do that skill. And at the same time, they had other children to feed. They had to get themselves ready and out to their jobs. And so we really wanted to work on this for him. And so this is an example of how we helped modify some stuff for him so he could be more independent. And we had on the right, you can see this taking a shower. These were some visuals we put together to help him because he could shower, but he needed some prompting while in that shower in order to move from step to step. And that used to be his parents verbally doing that. And we found a way to make it a visual calendar that we laminated and stuck on the wall. So his parents didn't have to be there anymore. And he began to follow those steps. The other part he had a problem with was this particular faucet was set up where it was a lever that you turned. And while you and I might be able to gauge when that temperature is appropriate to step in, he would sometimes have the water freezing cold, or it might be so hot he would scald himself. So these arrows, we put tape onto that lever and then tape arrow also onto the faucet. So he just knew to line up those two arrows. And we had selected that spot on his individual shower to know that when it got there, that was a good, safe, sort of perfectly warm temperature for his shower. So again, two modifications, and we took him from being dependent on others for a shower to independent, and we saved his family that precious half hour for them to continue to help their family. So when we're doing assessments, there are a number of formal assessments, and we're going to kind of breeze over these and just give you some quick examples. But I want to mention the caveat that you don't have to have a fancy formal pre-made assessment in order to figure out the needs of your student and where they're at in the learning process. Teacher-made are our favorite templates, and we're going to go into more detail, but we did want to give you some examples because these are also, if you can get a hold of one to look at, it gives you a place to start. So the first is the Brigance Transition. And if you look here, this is sort of, it's a really comprehensive formal assessment that discusses all kinds of areas of transition, including academic skills, post-secondary, vocational, independent living. And it's a pretty comprehensive assessment. And honestly, it's so comprehensive that it doesn't make a lot of sense for teachers to do that on a regular basis, but it's something we can pick and choose from as we need it. And again, another plug for why it's important to just make your own. Julia's going to review Stepping Out since she's familiar with that one.
Hi, everyone. Gonna let it load for a second. So Stepping Out is a curriculum I really like, especially if you're just starting out with kind of figuring out how to teach skills in the community. And again, I think what I really want you guys to see is what this could look like, because you can make your own. You can take your own pictures in your own community, in your own environment. You can do drawings. I mean, there's lots of ways to do something similar to this and make it by yourself. So here's an example of a lesson about grocery shopping. They give you some visuals. So if you have a student who doesn't read, you can go through these visuals ahead of time of like, what are the steps of going to the store, buying some groceries. And then this is for the teacher. This gives you a lot of information, or family member. I want to say that too. Just, you do not have to be a teacher to use these techniques. Anybody can use them. If you're at home and you're working with a family member, that's wonderful as well. So, but for somebody maybe who has not had much experience teaching in the community, this gives you a lot of information. So they talk about what are the behavior and social skills that you're working on? How do you plan for the outing to make sure that student's going to be successful? What materials you might need? Some activities you can practice at home or in the classroom to pre-teach. What are the problem situations that might arise? And then it gives you an outing checklist. And we're going to go into something that looks like this after, and how you can make your own. And we're actually going to be providing you a template that we made that you are welcome to have. But this is basically breaking down all the steps, all the different things that somebody might need to do to become independent in this task. And not only does this give you a way to kind of remind yourself what you need to be doing, because sometimes as adults, like we've done this a million times, right? We don't think about that we have to break it down to every little step when we are teaching it to somebody who it might not come naturally to. And this kind of shows us how to do that. That's pretty much what the, one lesson from stepping out looks like. So I'm gonna go back to our presentation, and Jenna's gonna talk about kind of the other assessments that you might use.
Yeah, so the unique learning system is a learning system, and it's a set of curriculum and also assessments that is available online, which has been really helpful for people during distance learning, but it's also a great resource for when you're in person. Again, this is a curriculum and assessment that you would pay for, but this is just, we wanted to give you an idea. So this is the positive work skills, and this is an example of something that the students would use to assess themselves. So I can look for a job, and what are all the steps involved in that? That I can fill out applications, I interview for jobs, I make a resume. And then you can see that they have these categories. You can do those things either by yourself, with help, or that you want to learn those steps. So again, just another example of a visual sort of assessment that students can use. Similarly, this is, I can look for a job, I work at a steady pace, I keep my work area clean. So these are things that we're considering as we're moving students from the classroom environment into a work environment. And just another good example of a solid assessment that you can use. But as Julia said, you can make these and target these for specific students. This is the My Work Learning Styles. And so this is really more talking about the student and what they possess, not just the skills, but their preferences. So I learn best by listening, reading, watching, doing. This is where we're getting into, is this an auditory processing student? Is this one a visual processing student? And again, you don't need the fancy language. You just need to know how your student learns best. And these are things we want to look at because, again, the goal is to pair them with the right environment, with the right job to help them be successful, either in your home or in your community in becoming an independent adult. And so this, again, is a great little assessment. But our favorite, and this is just, I'm going to give you a quick look at this. This is a blank task analysis that we have provided for you. A task analysis is exactly what it sounds like. It's taking a specific instructional task and breaking it down into its smaller components so that you can measure a student's progress and also begin some targeted specific instruction on areas of need. So as you see, you would write down the steps underneath 1 through 10 for a specific task. And across the top, they have the dates so that you can track it and put in there whether they're doing it independently, if they need some verbal prompting, maybe some physical prompting. And I'm going to go through some specific examples, but this is a template we're giving to you so that you can use this and fill it out and adapt it as you need for your individual students. So moving on to the next one.
Sorry, I'm just going to fix the screen really quick.
No worries. All right, so a little closer look at a task analysis. And this is an example of a task analysis and how you would use that task analysis, very similar to what we did for Brian. You can use that same task analysis to be a teaching tool. So this is just a quick how to wash your hands, turn on the water, wet your hands, add soap. These have visual icons to help students follow along and be able to complete each of those steps. And now if you have this above a sink in your household, you've taken away the person who's standing next to that student and giving them the prompts, and you're giving them the visual prompts so they can be independent and do this skill for themselves. A task analysis is developing all of the steps that you think a student needs to have to complete this goal. So in this case, washing hands. So in the next slide, we will tell you, we're showing again that specific example. And this particular, the template we've given you is nice because one of the things we love most about task analysis is it's not just a way to teach, it's a way to collect data. And so they're free, they are easy to make, and they direct instruction, meaning when we got to that one step in laundry that we recognized was hardest for our girl Jade, and it involved the washing machine, we got to put on our thinking caps and figure out a way to sort of accommodate and modify the parts that she was having difficulty with so that she could complete that task. And so they directed those modifications. Without our task analysis, we wouldn't have known at what place she was stuck. And then they are an assessment tool, because at the bottom of these task analysis, you can see over time where they're improving and where they've maybe gone from needing physical prompts to maybe you can just tell them. And over time, maybe you don't have to tell them, they're just doing it independently. So here are some examples, and we've given you, in addition to the blank template, we've included some task analysis for some very basic tasks, but you can use these for dishwashing, folding a t-shirt, brushing teeth. You can make a task analysis kind of for anything, and you'll find they're very helpful with your husbands and wives too. So we're going to take a look at one task analysis. This is a sample of vacuuming a rug, and it gives you an example of how we would fill one of these out and what that might look like. And at the bottom of this one, what I wanted you to see, we've listed the steps on the left for what it takes to vacuum a rug. But at the bottom, you can see on each day that you're doing that, you can total the number of I's or independents. And now you've got your percentage of independent steps. So you can start to track that, oh, maybe in the beginning, they could only do 30% of these steps independently. And then over time, as they practice, you'll see that they're getting to 40%, 50%, 60%. And again, you as an educator or you as a family member, when you see any of the letters that aren't an I, that they're not doing independently, you're going to focus in on that unwind cord. What are they having a problem? Is that a motor skill issue? You can begin to modify or accommodate for that motor issue. If it's just a matter of building muscle memory by having them repeat it, you could have a cord and just have them practice wrapping a cord as part of their day. So you begin to see improvement, and it really drives instruction. And again, the goal is moving them towards independence. So the other area that we're looking, we've assessed their skill sets. Now we want to also look at maybe their work environment preference. It's important, if you're trying to consider a student being independent and work down the road, that you want to know in what environment they're going to most likely be successful. So, and we all have these same preferences. Some people are indoor people, they're fine inside in an office. Other people, like myself, I like to be out and moving around. So I'm an adult transition teacher because I get to be in the community. Some people need a very quiet environment to be successful. Maybe they're impacted by autism and have some real sensitivities to sound. Other people can work in a loud, sort of chaotic environment. Physically active versus sitting, working with others versus working alone. And again, there are work environment preferences that are formal, but these are some topics that you can just consider on your own so that you begin to make a good match for your student to set them up for success as they're becoming independent down the road in whatever work task you're trying to find for them. So this is Daniel. Daniel is someone who does not care about whether or not he's dirty. He wanted an outdoor job and he liked to work with a bunch of people. So this is Daniel in his outfit. He also really liked the fact that he got to wear a really cool sort of outfit to work. He went and he cleaned buses for the school district, and he worked with a crew of 5 students together cleaning those buses. So he got his preferences, and he was successful because he had a hard time sitting still. If we'd set Daniel up in a job sitting, trying to put widget A into widget B or to file or collate, he would have been bored and unable to sustain that job. But by finding the right job, which were his preferences were outside moving around with a group, he was very successful in this job and became very independent. So again, the purpose of this is to identify the ideal setting and set them up for success to achieve that independence. This is another example of a common assessment tool for looking at your environmental preference. But again, you don't need this. You're just going to ask sort of those basic questions. So this is the unique learning systems work preference, work environment preference, and you can see clean or dirty, inside or outside, loud or quiet. If you are working with a student or if you are related to a student, you are going to know probably already in which environment students are most successful. But now you're going to be training your mind towards thinking that way to set them up for success and independence. The other thing is an interest inventory. So the purpose of an interest inventory is to really identify what a student is interested in. And if you are interested in something, you are highly likely to want to do that and be motivated to continue to do that. And so this is Antonio in my classroom. We have some classroom dogs. And Antonio, his work history was always retail. He had worked in a Marshalls. He had worked in Safeway. He always thought of himself as someone who was wanting to work in a store. But what we noticed is he really loved the animals. He just never in his mind saw animals as a potential job. And so when we did his interest inventory, we were able to realize, you know what, he would be great working at the local pet store doing some dog washing. And so Antonio loves working with animals. And this is him washing some dogs at the pet store. And he's naturally drawn to it. He's motivated to do a good job because he loves it when he's there. And so he didn't realize this was a potential job. So interest inventories can also help you give a student a chance to recognize you may be able to get work and get paid to do what you love. So this is an example of that. And so there's some common assessment tools for interest inventories. We've got PICS, and we're going to go through these quickly because I'm going to be mindful of our time. This is a pictorial interest inventory. Basically, it is showing pictures, drawings of people doing various activities, and the student just circles the activity that they could see themselves doing. It's really good for non-readers. This is another example of one, only this one is using actual photographs instead of the drawings, and the student would just put a little check mark below whichever of these jobs they could see themselves doing and think they might enjoy. And the unique learning system, again, this is another picture one where it's drawings and the student's going to go through and identify what aspects of a job, not the job themselves, but what aspect of a job they like, working with tools, taking things apart, building things. We had a young man who we got a job working as a landscape designer, landscape worker. And the main reason he did so well in that job is he loved guys that had uniforms and tools. And so when he got his tool belt, that guy was the happiest you've ever seen him. And he stayed in that same job for 15 years working in landscape. So even just knowing that they like tools is important. This is the ONET, an interest profiler, and this is one where the students can go online and you can read to them different aspects of jobs and they can check, and you can see across the top there's these icons about a big smiley face for if they love it, a tongue sticking out with 2 X'd out eyes for if they hate it, and it just goes through a list of your interests and things that you like or dislike, and at the end of this it'll generate for you some potential careers that you might be well suited to. And again, the thing to remember is some of our students have not envisioned themselves as adult productive members of society, and they may not even realize all the jobs that are available to you. So this is what we see our jobs as educators to bring those jobs to those students.
Thanks, Jenna. So after we've done all these different assessments, we want to now identify and then develop our pathway. So to identify the proper pathway, steps really are review your assessments, start with the data that you've collected, asking students their interests, all of those kind of things. And then make sure you're taking into consideration the needs of the family and the student. Determine the best environment for success. So, really just because a student could do a job in a certain place, that does not mean they're going to be the most successful there. Kind of like what Jenna was saying, when we're really listening to students' interests and their preferences, that's when they're going to be the most successful. So Antonio, great in the grocery stores. He was an excellent employee, stocking shelves, but his real love was dogs. And long-term, that's what he's going to be successful doing because he is so motivated. So I'm sorry, I skipped something right there. We actually made an assessment that you guys can use. We will be sending this out, I think in a couple days with all the packet and everything, but I'm just going to show you quickly what it looks like. You will be able to go through this on your own. It's just quickly asking about what are the family's needs. It's a way for you to brainstorm and kind of compile all the things to think about how to pick this pathway. You're going to move on to community and environment. And then you are going to kind of be reviewing your student skills and preferences that you've assessed in different ways. And then we're going to help you pick what pathway is most appropriate. And I am going to actually show you this in color in a different slide so you can see what that looks like. So matching your skills, needs, and environment, starting with the needs of the family, and then kind of deciding in which environment is really that need. Is it inside the home? Is it outside the home? What is the greatest need for the family or for the student? Is it independence of the student? Is it household responsibilities? Is it family? Is it in the family business? Or is it just we need some outside income? And then this is going to help you pick and the pathway and what you're going to really focus on, how you're going to build those skills to get towards independence. So if maybe the student is really not able to do a lot of basic self-care at home, they need help with eating or showering like Brian did, then your focus might be independent living skills. So you're going to be really teaching those skills. You're going to break those down and teach those skills very specifically to help remove some burden from the family, to help give the student some pride in being independent. And maybe that's where you end. If that's where what the student's level is that what the needs of the family is, then that's possibly where you stop. But you might expand that onto household responsibilities, looking at, hey, is there chores? Is there responsibilities that need to be done at home? Like our student Diego, who was helping out with childcare. He moved on from that independence into actually helping out his household. And that actually eventually went on to an income building activity as well. Those family businesses, I know there's going to be some students who there's already a business that the family has, and maybe it would just be really great that they focus on learning what tasks are done at that business. And so that's something that you can take into consideration when you are thinking about what skills do you want to focus on. We'll talk more about the student-run business and the Seek Employment, and actually in our second part of our presentation next week, we are going to be really focusing on community and how you build those relationships. So we'll talk more about that stuff in the next webinar as well. So once you have the proper pathway determined, then that's when we need to use our combination of ongoing skill development and community building to foster that independence. So really focusing on building those skills, working on them all the time, every day, practicing them, using the community around you. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's your local community, maybe it's a larger community, maybe it's the school, and help those students become independent in the skill needed to get to that pathway and that larger goal. So to really develop those skills and opportunities, teachers and family members need to provide those daily opportunities to develop skills. A student is not going to be able to come independent after one time teaching it. You need to do it every day. Repeat, repeat, repeat. If it's going to the grocery store, bring that student with you. If it's your family member, bring them with you. Have them help you. Give them one task to do. Give them opportunity to become independent. It's really important to provide that immediate feedback and use positive reinforcement to motivate students' continued practice. Because if a student doesn't feel that inner motivation, it's going to be a hard time to have them be successful. So that's why we're thinking of all those things that are important to the student, that they like, that they want to do, and that is going to help them be motivated to be successful. So I'm not going to have time to go through all of these strategies. You are going to, I think, get copies of these slides, so you can definitely look back through these. But just really quickly, this is a picture of a student using an assistive device to fold laundry. He was not able to do it on his own because of his fine motor needs, but we bought him this little board. It was about $5, I think, and it's a 3-fold, and you just flip it, and you flip it again, and you fold a t-shirt. You can make it out of cardboard. It's a way to help students. He now can do this, and he can go work in a store and fold clothes, where he wouldn't have been able to do that without that assistive device. So using and creating natural supports are really important. Who's going to be there to help support the student become as independent as possible in this pathway? Use your family members, use classmates who maybe have some other skills that they could help out, neighbors, community members. Maybe there's a grocery store worker that you see every time you go to the grocery store. Can you have your student interact directly with them instead of with you? How do you bring those natural supports in to create that independence? This is a great little picture of two of our students who both really wanted to work in a makeup store doing makeup, and they are practicing over and over again in the classroom as a skill that they are actually going to be using when they're applying for jobs.
Yeah, I sort of have the best dressed classroom in the district because of those girls. They're very into fashion and makeup, and they've done a great job, and they're looking at getting jobs actually this year in those areas. So I want to finish up here with some best practices as we go through this process. So the most important thing in helping students become independent is really building relationships. In order to create natural supports, it's super important to develop relationships in the community. Next week's topic, we're going to really focus in on this. But as Julia said, you can begin to do that as a parent, as a teacher. If you bring your student everywhere you go, you are beginning to identify them to the community as a member of that community. You are going to be teaching people how to interact with that student. If you have a routine that brings your student into contact with people on a regular basis, they may get to know them. If it's always the same grocery store at around the same time, you might have the same checker. And then make introductions and encourage interactions and sort of break this cycle of people seeing our students as other and help them be recognized as part of the community. The next thing is using data. Again, it doesn't have to be some formal data format. It can be using those task analysis. But if we get intentional with our measurement of student performance, we can really target our instruction to help them reach that independence more quickly. So it refocuses our attention, and it helps us as educators and family members know how best to serve our students. Another one is age-appropriateness. This is a group of my staff and students. After they graduate my class, they are invited with us to our happy hours because they are all over 22 years of age, and they come break bread, and some have root beer and some have a beer. And you know what? That's what 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds, and the rest of our community are doing. And we are showing people that these adults with disabilities are like productive members of society. And it's really good modeling for them on social skills and how to behave in the community. And also, when we're out there, the thing to remember is that you are the model for how the world should treat your student. The way that you dress that student, the way that you communicate with that student, the way you make them advocate for themselves are teaching other people they're important. So this is a young student of ours who graduated having lunch with one of my staff. And at this restaurant, when the waiter came over and said to my staff, you know, okay, and took his order, what would your friend like to eat? He directed him, why don't you ask him? And Bobby was able to order for himself. And so it's just teaching people, you know, he can order for himself, he can do for himself, he can pay for his meal, he can hand you the money. So you are the model for the way the rest of the world treats our students. So when you treat them with respect and treat them as an adult, other people will follow suit. And then again, we started with this at the beginning, but you really want to build confidence in these students. And so if you start with working on the skill that your student is closest to being independent with, it helps them have that success right away and feel positive about their work and generates their interest in learning more skills to be independent. So always start with something that they are really close to being able to do independently and get them across the finish line there so they're motivated to keep learning. And, you know, as a reminder, how often do we choose to do the things that are hardest for us? I certainly use a calculator when I balance my checkbook. I'm not doing that by hand. You know, we all use tools to make our lives easier. So remember, they want to choose the thing that's easiest for them, just like we do. And that's it. This is a group of our kids at a dance with other people their age. We've got people that date. We've got people out in the world working. And our goal is to help other people be able to do the same.
Muted.
Muted, muted.
Hello, thank you again, Jenna and Julia. What an amazing presentation. And we're super excited to have you both come back next Friday, I believe. and do part two, because we just scratched the surface this week, but we do have some questions that we wanted to ask. And the first question that came up was, how do you work or collaborate with the community employers?
It's a great question. That's a question that we could probably go on for a whole nother hour on, but we'll try to give you some just real basics. You know, I think something that Jenna just said, which is, you know, start to be a community member. Make yourself seen, make your students seen. You go to those stores that you're hoping to get jobs at. Become patrons, say hello, have your students say hello. You know, when we can get employers to feel invested in our students, we're much more likely that they're going to give our students a chance. You know, there's a lot of ways to do it. And I think actually next week we might be trying to give you guys some more specific strategies for this. But I think that would be my biggest thing is just, if you are part of that community, if you're making your students part of the community, your community is going to want to give back. And then you do have to be very direct, and sometimes just say it, just go and ask for it. Offer some different things. Offer, hey, maybe we can come in and help and volunteer for a little bit, show you what we can do. If you like it, maybe you'll give us a job. Those are some basic strategies. Anything you want to add, Jenna?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the other thing that happens is a lot of times once you're in the door, our kids sell themselves. And we have a lot of employers who talk about our students being some of the best workers they've ever had, just in terms of their devotion, motivation. And then that little extra piece that's that we have a job site, for example, where the manager came to me one day and said, you know, I wrote a letter to our corporate office because I have customers that say that specifically they come in this store because they see that we are working with your students and they love that we have that partnership. So again, just, you know, people want to do good things in their community, and that inclusiveness is something that sells itself once you get your foot in the door.
A couple other questions that have come up. One is around, Lonnie, did you want to take this one? Because I know we
Sure. We had a question that may be best answered by referring to some of the Phoenixia resources that are already available on our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you are wondering or curious about ways to support challenging behaviors, ways to support speech and language development, ways to support sensory and self-regulation, please feel free to go to the Phoenixia Foundation YouTube page and watch the webinars that will give you really great ideas about supporting communication, supporting challenging behaviors, and supporting sensory and regulatory sort of self-regulation needs. Okay.
I will piggyback on that a little, which is that this is where job choice comes into play. And I'll give you an example. I personally believe that we can find a job for any kid or any young adult. We had a student who had some pretty significant behaviors and also had some hygiene issues. And we were thinking, where on earth are we going to find a job for the student? Ended up being outside in a park. And guess what? Big area to have some behaviors in, not as many people around. His personal funk was not as big a deal with the fresh breeze blowing. And I mean, so I think if you get creative as a job developer, you can sort of find something for everyone and even handle students that have more significant behaviors too.
Yeah, Jenna, that's a really great point. And, you know, I was commenting to another question that came in during your talk about, you know, a family member who was having a hard time maintaining a job because of some of these, you know, behaviors and just difficulty following through with the task. And I think, you know, to your point, don't give up, right? Look for that just right fit. Look for the people in your community that really want to support, you know, our students, and know how, you know, even at a very basic level, to make an inclusive workplace with accommodations, right? Don't give up. Find a good fit for that kiddo. So I love that you said, you know, there's a place for everyone. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I would just add is that even if you can't find that place, make sure that your adult is, you know, helping around the home. let them be productive. I know you guys hit on that, but sometimes it's not always working outside the home, but it's working, for the family and supporting the family with many different, things that can be done just around the house. And you may want to start with really baby steps, like even if they've lost motivation or, self-confidence or whatever, just help build that back up, through, different strategies that motivate them. Right. So just something to, consider.
Was there another question, or if not?
Yeah. The other thing I'll just hit on while Lonnie's looking at the question is, folks, again, just, we will be sending out a link to the presentation here that will be housed on our Facebook page along with YouTube. So you will always have access to this presentation. And then also Jenna and Julia will be sending me links to these documents that we'll be sending out so that any of you can be able to download them. We'll be putting them on a Google Docs page, just like we do with the certificate, and folks will be able to have access to download the different resources that they have indicated throughout the presentation today.
I just saw a comment that I just kind of want to say something towards.
Oh, please.
I just saw somebody ask if it's ever too late to work with somebody who has special
nice, please.
And I want to say, no, it's never too late. I mean, you need to go where your child is, where your student is. And like we said, like really think about, what do they like? What are they interested in? What works for them? What doesn't work for them? But no, it's never too late to try to help somebody build independence and confidence in their life. So I think that was just one thing I wanted to say before we move on to other questions.
Great. So we have another question around non-speaking or nonverbal students and ways to best support those students in either, a homework environment or a community work environment.
Yeah, that's a super great question. And I know Jen and I have both worked with lots of students who have these needs. And, I think if somebody doesn't speak, maybe it's harder to find out what their preferences are, what they want to be doing, but trying to use things with pictures. Maybe it's just observation. Maybe the student doesn't know how to respond with pictures even. So can you observe the student and try to figure out where they are going to be best placed, using as many accommodations or modifications or assistive devices that you can to help that student be successful. So maybe you are bringing a picture book that you've created that's going to help them communicate with somebody on the job site. Jenna, I don't want to take a whole thing because I know you have probably a lot to add to this.
No, I mean, I agree 100%. And I think that, I think the most important thing is demystifying that inability to communicate in a traditional way to the community around them, right? And so finding ways that offer communication. And just like we said, you're the model for how people will interact. It's the same for nonverbal students. And so if they're using a little picture book that you have where they're going to ask questions, same thing. If you go to a restaurant ahead of time and you pre-plan that they're going to order some food at this place and you've got the little pictures of what they might want to order, let them point and show it to the restaurant waiter or waitress. Same thing if they're going to make a purchase in the environment, out in the natural environment. It's the idea of demystifying that communication and teaching others how to communicate with the person. And so I also think it's super important for people to understand that a lot of people have much more receptive language skills than they do productive language or expressive language skills. And so don't assume that because someone's not talking that there's not a whole bunch going on behind there. And I think that's a great disservice to those kids. So that's why a lot of the tools we talked about were pictorial and visual and able for a student to just indicate by pointing.
Yeah. I had a student who had very, very little language. And he had some other really great skills. He actually ended up working for a scientist, cataloging rocks for a scientist, because he was great with attention to detail. He couldn't talk, but you know what? We were able to give him this really concrete way to do something, and he had some really, really strong skills. So I love that what you said, Jenna, is just because somebody has to have a hard time communicating does not mean that they don't have skills and that we can't teach them skills.
And I would just say that, we're at the top of the hour. And what we will do is we'll also look at any of the other questions that came through. I'll be sharing them with, Jenna and Julia, and they can, incorporate them into the presentation next week. But I do think overall we've covered the majority of the questions that have come in. And we are just super excited to have you both back next Friday US time and Saturday morning in the Philippines. So thank you both again for this just amazing presentation.
Thanks for having us.
That went into this was just incredible. So I learned a lot as a parent who has, a son who's 18, and we're working towards these things. So thank you so much for sharing, and I'll see you both next week.
Thank you.
Everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.